Hey, what's up, guys? Today, I'll show you a crime drama film, El Secreto de sus Ojos. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with the prosecutor Benjamin remembering a memory. He and a woman were saying goodbye to each other at a train station. The man boarded the train station with his luggage and stole one last glance back at the woman. The train started to move and the woman couldn't help but run after it. Eventually, the train gained speed and the woman was left behind. The same man, but now older, is writing all this down in a notebook. Frustrated, he tears off the page and starts over. He decides to begin with the case in 1974. Specifically, the morning of June 21st, when the victim of a rape and murder case was still alive and spending her last breakfast with her husband. They were happy and laughing. Soon enough, pain and misery would follow. Benjamin sighs and tears the page again. The right words just wouldn't come to him, and so he decides it would be better to continue writing another day. Benjamin is a retired federal justice agent who is now hoping to put into words the experiences he's had. The next morning, he visits his former workplace and his former boss, Irene. She is surprised that he is planning to write a novel, and he explains that writing about the particular case that has haunted him for years is helping him make sense of it. She goes to her bookshelf and unearths a vintage typewriter. She gives it to Benjamin and advises him to start at the beginning and stop dawdling. For Benjamin, Irene was the real beginning. He remembers the day he first met her, a beautiful woman dressed in red that is about to be his new boss. All he could do was stare at her as she warmly greeted him. Behind him was his partner, who she also greeted. Shortly after they were introduced, a rape and murder case was assigned to them. Benjamin initially tried to pass the case to another team, but it was his turn, and there was nothing he could do. Resigned to his fate, Benjamin went to the crime scene and met the inspector. What waited for him there was a brutal sight that rendered him speechless. He couldn't believe how young the dead victim was, and the pain of her death gripped him. He and the inspector went to talk to the victim's husband, Ricardo, who works as a bank clerk. He was understandably shocked by the news and gave short answers to their questions. Benjamin mentioned that their neighbors told him he has an unusual habit of going home every lunchtime. Ricardo explained that he and his wife liked a noontime show. He would go home every day so they could watch it. The next day at the office, Benjamin's team was informed that 2 construction workers were arrested in connection to the rape and murder case. He immediately went to the police station so he could speak to the 2 workers. The policeman told him that the 2 had already confessed, but when he looked at them closely, he saw that they were tortured into confessing. Furious, Benjamin stormed back into his office and attacked his colleague, Romano, who ordered the arrest of the 2 workers. Romano reasoned that they are just 2 lowlifes and no one cares if they're tortured. Their other co-workers tried to separate them, and Benjamin threatened that he would file a complaint and end Romano's career. Benjamin then saw his partner getting drunk in a local bar. He was an alcoholic, and so Benjamin was disappointed that he was now off the wagon. He paid for his friend's drink and helped him get home from the bar. However, the partner's wife wouldn't allow him inside in his condition, so he just took his partner to his own apartment. While his partner dozed off on his couch, Benjamin flipped through the victim's past photos and crime scene photos. That same night, he went to Ricardo and asked for more photos of his dead wife. He needed to get a feel of what she was like in life. He told Benjamin that his wife grew up in the town of Chivilcoy, but left to work in Buenos Aires as a teacher. While browsing through stacks of photo albums, Ricardo also shared that he doesn't want the murderer to be executed. Instead, the murderer deserved to suffer in jail for the rest of his life. Benjamin then noticed the same man in many of the pictures, staring eerily at the victim. Ricardo identified the man in the photo as the suspect, a friend of the victims from Chivilcoy. Back in the present day, Benjamin explains to Irene that there was something in the man's eyes that caught his attention. His looks were full of longing and obsession. She asks him why he decided now to talk about this old case after all this time. He answers that for 20 years, he was busy with everything else. Now that he is retired, he has nothing else to do but confront the demons of his past. After their discovery, Ricardo called the suspect's home at Chivilcoy, and his mother answered. She told him that her son had moved to Buenos Aires more than a month ago. He asked her if her son knew the victim, and the mother replied that they were childhood sweethearts, and he never got over her when she left Chivilcoy. Benjamin chased this lead, but the suspect had already disappeared from his job and the hostel he was staying at. He also wasn't able to obtain a search warrant for the house of the suspect's mother in Chivilcoy. Benjamin and his partner decided to forego the proper procedures and entered the premises to get evidence against the suspect. He rifled through the magazines and cabinets until he finally saw a stack of letters sent by the suspect to his mother, hidden underneath a drawer full of clothes. Some of the letters were recent, but there was no hint of his guilt in any of them. He kept reading and rereading the letters, hoping to find a clue about the suspect's whereabouts, but the letters were just filled with mundane names and topics. Unfortunately, the judge finds out from local police that 2 of his justice agents have been seen in Chivilcoy. In fact, the partner was even seen drinking alcohol straight out of the bottle in the nearby store. Irene is both embarrassed and furious about their behavior, and she reprimanded them for behaving so recklessly. Still, she defended her team members and asked the judge not to punish them, but the case would now have to be officially closed. Back in the present day, Benjamin and Irene are looking at the photos of her engagement party and reminiscing about the good times. He remarks that it was only a few weeks after the case was closed that she got engaged. She shows him a group photo with him looking all serious, but she doesn't realize that he is actually longingly looking at her. She tells him that she is glad that he is writing a novel looking back on the past, but she knows that she needs to move forward. Irene stands up from the table and gives him a kiss on the forehead goodbye. Benjamin then remembers when he accidentally ran into Ricardo in a train station a year after the murder. He discovered that he had been diligently going from station to station, waiting for the suspect to eventually pass through. He also tearfully confessed that he is starting to forget his memories of the victim, no matter how hard he tried to remember the little details of their last days together. Moved by Ricardo's devotion, Benjamin and the partner pleaded with Irene to reopen the case. She reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, the partner finally figures out who the names mentioned in the letters are with the help of his friends at the bar. They are football players from a certain team that the suspect is passionate about. In a bid to catch the suspect, Benjamin and his partner attended one of the team's games. They see him in the crowd and try to chase him. The suspect flees, but he is caught by some of the stadium's security guards. They arrested the suspect and kept him detained for 3 days. On the day they were supposed to interrogate him, the judge and the partner hadn't arrived yet. Benjamin wanted to go ahead with the interrogation without them, but Irene insisted that they had to do things by the book. Benjamin didn't listen and went on with the interrogation. The suspect admitted that he knew the victim when they were growing up together, but denies any involvement in the rape and murder. Irene walked in and caught the suspect staring at her chest. She suddenly decided to take control of the interrogation and began to insult the suspect's masculinity. She said that there is no way he was the killer because he isn't strong or virile enough to commit the crime. The suspect got so enraged that he slapped Irene and proudly boasted that he raped and killed the victim. Benjamin attacked the suspect for slapping Irene and threatened to kill him for hurting her. Back in the present, Irene calls Benjamin and tells him that she has changed her mind and she'd like to read his novel when he is done. But the case didn't have a satisfying ending. Despite being convicted, the suspect was freed by Romano to get back at him. The suspect was then given a position in the newly elected president of Argentina's security team. Benjamin and Irene confronted the colleague about this, but there was nothing they could do. After their meeting, they got into an elevator and the suspect walked in. He didn't say anything, but just casually revealed a gun and a silent threat to Irene and Benjamin. Benjamin regretfully informed Ricardo that his wife's murderer was now free. Ricardo is saddened and declared that he deserved to live a life in prison. One night, the partner got drunk in a bar again and was involved in a brawl. Benjamin rescued him and took him to his apartment. He then headed out to go get the partner's wife. The wife was furious that the partner was drunk again and told Benjamin that this would be the last time she would ever go to his apartment to get her husband. They arrived at his apartment and discovered that the door had been broken. He walked in and saw that all his pictures had been flipped over. He finally saw his partner's dead body lying on his bed. Worried about Benjamin's safety, Irene hurriedly made plans to get him to where her cousins had stayed. Benjamin didn't want to go and leave her behind, but she insisted that he had to go. She went with him to the train station, as shown in the memory earlier in the film, and the two almost share a tongue massage. It took everything in him to leave her, and he never stopped staring at her as her figure receded in the distance. In the present, Irene has just finished his novel. She is surprised by the depth of emotion in the novel's last scene. With tears in her eyes, she asks Benjamin why he didn't take her with him. He doesn't respond. To lighten the mood, she asks him how the next 10 years were. He tells her that he spent it counting llamas in a far-flung province, and that when he returned to Buenos Aires a decade later, she was already married with 2 kids. Irene retorts that he himself was married to a rich girl. Benjamin confesses that he had never loved anyone but her, which is why his marriage didn't work out. He tells her that he doesn't want to live an empty life anymore. This time, it is Irene who says nothing. The next day, the two track down the addresses of the suspect and Ricardo. The suspect's address hasn't been known since 1975, but they did have some luck with Ricardo's address. Benjamin goes to his address in a remote mountain area. It appears that Ricardo leaves alone. The two are awkward, but they are glad to see each other. Ricardo explains that he wanted a fresh start, and so he transferred to another branch of the bank. He never got married again, and Benjamin sees that he still keeps his wife's pictures on display on the mantle. Benjamin asks him how he'd been able to move on from his wife's death, especially with the killer still free. Ricardo reasons that time has healed his wounds, but Benjamin doesn't believe him. He tells him about the partner's death and how he believes he had been assassinated by goons sent by Romano as an act of retaliation. When the goons had arrived at Benjamin's apartment and saw the partner there, he pretended to be Benjamin to protect him. This is why all of Benjamin's pictures were flipped over. Finally, Ricardo reveals that he waited for the suspect one night, kidnapped him, then shot him. Satisfied with his confession, Benjamin leaves. But while he's driving away, he remembers what Ricardo told him the night they'd met. The killer deserves to rot away in a cell for the rest of his life. The more he thinks about it, the more he begins to believe that Ricardo didn't kill the suspect. He stops the car and walks back to Ricardo's house. Hidden in the trees, he watches as Ricardo walks to an adjoining room. He follows and sees him feeding the suspect, who he has kept in his cell for these past 2 decades. Benjamin's hunch was right. Ricardo could never let go of his obsession, and he gave his own brand of justice to the suspect. Without saying anything, Benjamin leaves. After returning to Buenos Aires, Benjamin visits his partner's grave and pays his respects. He then goes to Irene's office. He says that there's something he needs to tell her. The movie ends with the two smiling at each other, both understanding that they will finally have a chance at love. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.